Scoop. I'm Paula Rizzo. Have you ever read a book where you're like, I love so many things about this book? Maybe it's the characters, maybe it's where it's located, maybe it's, what you learn. For me, Where the Crawdads Sings was one of those books. I loved it so much, and it's becoming a movie, which is happening more and more these days, where some of your favorite books are going to the big screen, to the small screen, all of the above. And I was curious about the behind the scenes. Because as many of you know, I've spent my career as a television producer, which is, running things behind the scenes. And so I know there's a whole team behind putting that broadcast together. Same thing for a book. And I was curious to see, how does this happen? How does a best-selling book become a best-selling book? So today I have an editor who I'm going to bring on in just a moment. She's not just any editor. She is the editor of Where the Crawdads Sing and many other best-selling books. And I will bring her on in just a minute. And speaking about books, as you may or may not know, I am the author of 2 books about productivity, Listful Thinking and Listful Living. And I actually am at work on a fiction book right now, which is totally different, which is really fun. And the journey for all authors is different. This I know. I work with a lot of authors to media train them and get them ready to get their books out into the world. But here's the thing I know for sure. Media and how you use media when it comes to your books makes a big difference. And so your book could be fantastic. It could be great. But if you're not the best seller of that book, if you're not out there talking about it and putting it in the best light, people might not find it. So you want to make sure that you are using media as best as you can. So I do have a free resource for you if you're thinking about, putting your stuff out into the world. If you go to paularizzo.com/checklist, you'll get my checklist to become a go-to media expert. And media these days means much more than traditional media. We're talking about like this show I'm doing right now is considered media, podcasts, anything like that, videos that you produce. So if you go there, you can check that out and stay in touch. And I want to hear from you throughout the broadcast. So if you're watching on any of the platforms, why don't you share it with whoever it is, on your timeline so that they know this is happening as well. And if you have any questions throughout this broadcast, or even if you're watching the replay, leave it in the chat boxes below. We will get to it for sure. We're going to hold some of those questions so that when we bring our guest on, which is right now, it's happening. I want to bring on Singh Carlson, who is an executive editor at GP Putnam's Sons. And I'm thrilled to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Hi, Paula. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Of course. Okay, so you have worked, obviously, on Where the Crawdads Sing and many other best-selling books. What are some of the other books you've worked on as well?
I worked on a book called The Light We Lost by Jill Santopolo, which was also a Reese Witherspoon book club pick. I worked on a book called The Family by Naomi Krupitsky, which this past November was a Read with Jenna pick. We Must Be Brave, and a number of other books over the course of my career.
So great. Well, so when we're talking about these books, which have done really, really well, what is it that you're doing as the editor? So you're the one who's acquiring this book. You're the one who's saying, hey, I would like to work on this with this author and get it out into the world and publish it with our company. What do you see? What is that spark? What is something that you see and and you're like, this is it?
I wish there was a formula that I could give people, because I would be like one of the richest people in publishing if I could. But I will say that my experience of reading a book that I fall in love with is almost always the same. If it is a book that keeps me up past my bedtime and I just have to finish it, I know that there is something really special there. And that has happened across a variety of genres, but it is always something about just caring about those characters enough that I need to see their story through to the end. Some other books that, have been successful, they haven't necessarily had that like immediate emotional response, but the topic is so interesting, or I think that the like elevator pitch is just so good. The hook is so good that I just really feel like I have a vision. I feel like you'll hear a lot of editors talk about their vision for how to bring that book to the market and how to find that book's audience. And so it's either like I need to completely fall in love, or I need to have that crystal clear vision. If I don't have either of those things, then the book's
Not going to be.
With me, go nowhere. Someone else might have that vision for that same book because it is so subjective. But
it's a lot of pressure for you, I would think. I mean, honestly, like you are picking books that people will be reading and be, I mean, like this became a big deal. Everybody I know has read this book, it's, and you read it one of the first readers, really. I mean, I'm sure many other people read it before you to make sure it was good. And, there's agents involved and all that. But I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I mean, the pressure is real. Yeah. I remember when I first even got into book publishing, I got to have an informational interview with someone. And I said to them, I was like, how do you deal with the pressure of this? Because it's just gambling.
Yeah.
You have no idea if a book is ultimately going to be successful because as much as you love a book, there are no levers that you can pull and know that a book is going to become successful. All of the stars have to align. So it helps that it's not my money that I'm using to acquire the book. It is the company's money. But still, the company is trusting me with that. Yeah. And, I mean, anyone who gets into book publishing, it's because they love books and they, stories affected them in some way in their life. And I'm no different. And so the books that I put out into the world, I want them to be books that inspire people in some way. So, in that way, yes, that is a lot of pressure to feel, wanting to make sure that your books are doing good things in the world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Exactly. No big deal. Just, make sure it's changing everybody's lives and inspiring them beyond belief.
Or entertaining them. Thankfully, I am also like, I just want to be entertained sometimes. Everybody needs an escape.
That's true. And, you mentioned loving books. And so we're getting a couple of comments in from LinkedIn, Adisha saying, love reading books. So we agree. We love reading books too. That is, yeah. So what specifically though about Crawdads kept you up? I mean, I know what kept me up, but for you who you're looking at it as a different thing, what was it?
Yeah. It was sort of surprising to me when I started to hear that book reviewed as like a crime novel or a thriller, because for me, what really drew me in was the love story between Kaya and Tate. I always describe myself as a bit of a romantic. That doesn't just mean like romantic love. It's sort of about a way of viewing the world. But for me, it was that love story between Kaya and Tate, and then having and where that went. So that's really what kept me reading, and also the natural scenes. I mean, the nature writing is just so beautiful.
So for me too, like I think just having nature as a character, I thought was like so clever. Obviously, I mean, this is a nonfiction writer who had been writing about nature and animals and things for many, many years. So it was no surprise to me that she described this place I've never been to in such an interesting way that I felt like, hey, this is a part of the story. This is a character here. I'm excited to see the movie. I think it's going to be really fun to see what they did. I mean, for you as an editor, and I want to get more into, the ins and outs of what your day-to-day is like working with people, but because so many books are now being acquired and then turned into TV and movies, I mean, is that something that's in your mind at all while you're reading it?
And not in the initial read, because it's just so, I mean, as hard as it is to get a book published, it feels like it's 10,000 times harder to then have like a movie or a TV show actually made from that. But that being said, it does feel like with the explosion of different streaming services, there are a lot more companies who need so much more content that we are hearing from those companies a little bit more directly, whether through their scouts, just that they are looking for IT, they're looking for intellectual property and stories that they can bring to the screen. But that can't be a part of the initial experience, because the experience of reading a book is so different from watching something on the screen. Sure. So my focus is always going to be on what is this read like? Who are the readers that are going to want to come to this book? Because that's the industry we know. Of course, there's overlap between readers and people who watch TV and
Sure.
movies, but I have to be thinking about the reading audience.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of audiences, if anyone in our audience has questions, leave them for us in the chat boxes below, and we will get to those in just a minute. But I want to dig a little bit more into the role of an editor. It sounds like, oh, an editor, you're editing. That is what you do. But there's so much more to the job than that. So walk me through, what your day-to-day is like. And then I want to talk a little bit about acquiring books and what that looks like too.
Yeah. I wish that editing is what happened in my day-to-day. That's more often what happens after hours and weekends.
Sure.
Your day-to-day. So as an editor, you're working on so many different projects that are in a different stage of publication. Because something else, just to touch on that previous question about, can you be reading for TV when you're reading a book for potentially publishing it? Part of what makes that also impossible is that the runway to publication is so long. 18 months is like average, but it wouldn't, surprise me if it was longer, from when I'm reading something to when it's actually going to be published. And the time, the marketplace can change a lot within those 18 months. But so I'm, I'll acquire, for me personally, I acquire between 8 to 12 books a year. Which means I'm publishing between 8 to 12 books a year. But those, you can't be working only on one book at a time. So in my day-to-day, it's a lot of email, like so much of office life in the year 2022. It's a lot of email. It's a lot of making sure that everybody knows what they need to know about different projects in their various stages. Because I'll edit a book for several months, but then once I put it into what we say, we put it into production. That means we send it over to the managing editorial team for it to be copy edited and then proofread, and then hopefully turned into, something we can put up on NetGalley, and then sent out for reviews. And, marketing starts to, you're talking with marketing, you're talking with publicity, you're launching it to sales, agents are having questions. The literary agent for the project will be asking, like, what's happening with this? Tell me about this. So, I'm following one book for 18 months, but that's happening. I'm probably touching like 18 projects at a time.
Wow. So it is a lot. So if people think like, oh, my book is going to be the only thing on the person's plate, this is not the case, right? There's a lot more going on.
There's a lot going on. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
8 to 10 books per year that you're publishing.
Probably 8 to 12 is
8 to 12. 8 to 12. Okay. So walk me through what so you mentioned NetGalleys. So for those people who are do not know NetGalleys, this is where you would go to read the advanced copy of the book. So this is where members of the media go. This is where bloggers go. This is where people who want to like get a feel for, hey, what's coming out in the next, 6 months or whatever. So we can write a review about it, or we can know if we want to interview that person in the media. That is, kind of an industry insider thing. I love reading books on there. It's always fun to kind of get like the first look. But let's talk about acquiring this. So for people who are not familiar with fiction, and being able to get that out there, you do need to write the entire book as the author, have the whole book done, ready to go in its best outfit, and then get somebody who can be on your team and help you on the agenting side. So you need an agent, and then that agent will then help you to shop the book around to different publishers. So that's where then Tara comes in, right? So an agent comes to you and says, hey, we have this great project. We love this book. What do you think? Then what happens?
So then first, based on the pitch, sometimes I'll recommend that they actually send it to a colleague, because not everyone knows exactly what you're looking for in that moment. And, but then if it's the right pitch for the kinds of books that I'm publishing, if it seems like the kind of story that I'm looking for and doing, I'll read the novel, along with, you're probably receiving, I don't know, at least 15 submissions a week, I would say. But that number can vastly differ. There are some, publishing is cyclical. There are some times of year when you're going to be receiving a lot more projects. Those are sort of based around 2 big international book fairs that happen. So in April, there's the London Book Fair. And then in October, there's the Frankfurt Book Fair. And those are where publishers from all around the world will come and want to hear about the new books that are going to be coming down the pipeline that everybody is excited about. So there's a big flurry of submissions in advance of those two book fairs. But I read it, and if it's not for me, I will write an email explaining those thoughts to the agent. If it is for me, then I will share it with my publisher, sometimes also with my marketing director and my publicity director. And I will bring it up at our editorial meetings. So every imprint, I think probably across the industry, has a weekly editorial meeting at which all of the editors at that imprint will talk about the projects that they have been receiving. And you don't only bring up the projects that the way that these work, it depends imprint by imprint, but typically you don't only bring up the project that you're interested in. You'll bring up projects that maybe it wasn't right for you, but the agent has interest, so it's definitely going to be placed somewhere, and you just want everybody to be aware of it.
Yeah. And hang on one second. I just want to pop in on what you said there with the editorial meeting. So it's, everybody in across the whole imprint is there. So you're able to say, hey, this book is about XYZ thing. I really like it because of this. Hey, marketing and PR, what do you think? So that those people can weigh in. Does that help make your decision? Do you make different decisions based on what people in the room are saying about that type of book?
That can really depend. And so again, that depends a little bit imprint by imprint based on how publicity or marketing driven they are. I think that at Putnam, it can also depend on the project. Like for nonfiction projects, you definitely need publicity and marketing to weigh in, because so often that's like a platform driven kind of book, and they will need to do a deep dive into what that person's audience and connections already are and what their exposure has already been. On the fiction side of things, 100% it would be amazing to be able to have publicity and marketing read and be on side from the get-go. But the thing that happens with fiction and as an editor, is that sometimes you're buying a project and you have a vision for how it's going to read when you're done with it, but it's not that project yet.
I see.
And so the reading experience is not necessarily going to be what it will be, or you can make it at the end. And so that can just be something that you have to sort of negotiate with people. And sometimes, my publisher reads everything that I'm going to want to acquire, but it sort of depends on whether, where the project is in terms of how good it's reading at the time.
I see. Right. So it's like, hey, the future iteration of this book will be like this. Yeah. And, it's an important distinction between nonfiction and fiction. When you write nonfiction books, it's very much about, who the author is, what their platform is. Fiction, right? You need to make sure it's the best story ever. And it doesn't even matter if the person has ever written a book, the author has ever written anything ever before. So it is a little bit of a different animal there. We're getting some questions about media, which I'll get to in just a minute. But if anybody else has any questions, please leave those for us in the chat boxes below. But I just wanted to ask about, we mentioned the agent. So the agent is the one who sort of then pitches you. Do you ever take pitches from authors directly, or does it just have to go through an agent?
It has to go through an agent. The volume is already so high that to also consider receiving things directly from authors would make it almost impossible for me to actually consider anything.
Totally. There's a level of this has been vetted already, someone who is respected in the medium. Do you work with the same agents over and over again, or what is that relationship like?
There are a couple of agents where we've had more than one book deal together. And I think that will continue to kind of grow as my career continues. But I'm always open. I think you can discover something anywhere. It really is just about the read and the story. So I think that, it's sometimes surprising, or there are agents that there are probably agents I've never done work with that I really should do work with. There are just so many literary agents out there, honestly. And we don't all know each other, which is why it is such a business of connection and needing to connect with people because, this one agent might have a project that could be perfect for me. But if we've never emailed before or heard of one another before, we're just not gonna.
It's never gonna pass. Yeah. What
Yeah,
about
exactly.
the relationship of the author with you, with the editor, right? So now you have
Mhm.
acquired the book. Actually, wait a minute. I'm not gonna ask that yet. I want to know about the vat of money that you have, that then you decide who's getting this money. How does that work? Like, do you get like a bunch of money in the beginning of the year that you're like, now I've got to spend this, or how does that work?
No, I do not have any kind of budget. And
Okay.
I don't know if like Putnam as an imprint has an advanced budget, or
Huh.
if Penguin or Penguin Random House it has like an advanced budget. I don't know. I just know that when a project comes in and I am like, this is something I want to do, I go to my publisher and we talk about sort of where we think we might value it at. And to do that, you do what's called comp research.
Mhm.
So we'll use BookScan, or if it's something that's been published by Penguin Random House, we'll use our internal systems to look up what the sales of that book have been. And we'll try to find books that are in a similar sort of category, published by really just in a similar category. And do we think we could do similarly with this book? And that's what helps us a little bit to figure out what the level will be. But also, this is where that gambling comes in,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's just whatever price the market will bear, and you will be super surprised by something going for so much more money than you thought it would. Yeah, so we run, probably most people won't have heard of this, but we run what's called a P&L, which is a profit and loss statement.
Mhm.
And we'll using all of our comp research, we'll put in, a number of sales that we think a number of copies we might be able to sell for this book.
Right.
And
So it's like
then
how successful you think this will be,
exactly.
where you think this will land. Okay. So my ideas of you like Scrooge McDuck with your vat of money, like not the picture, no. Not totally how it works. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
But there are some tricks that you have, right, as an
Mhm.
editor to be able to say, like, hey, this is so good. I don't want any other publishing house to get this. And so there
Mhm.
are some ways which you did use with where the Crawdads Sing. This book was a preempt. So could you explain what that means and when you pull out that card?
Yeah. So that is the card that you pull when you stay up all night reading something, because you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm in love with this book. And you think that there might be an advantage to not going to auction and letting other publishers like have a chance to even offer on it.
Got it.
So the preempt, it's literally you are preempting an auction. So you are trying to make sure the auction doesn't happen, and you're going to make that offer to the agent. Without and you're trying to, usually you would only try that if you have read the submission very quickly after it has come in and you think you might have a head start before other people. And also, when you make a preempt, it needs to be enough, like a strong enough offer that the agent would be willing to accept that, rather than going to an auction
So you
situation.
make it a really sweet deal because you really
Yeah.
want it. Got it. Got it. That's
Yeah.
cool. So like as an author, that's amazing. That's an amazing thing that you would definitely want to have happen to you. So let's talk a little bit about the agent, or I'm sorry, the so many people, so many titles. The author
Mhm.
working with you, right? With the
Mhm.
editor. So how does that relationship work? You read the Crawdads, you love it. You're like, hey, this works really well. What are the things maybe you think this didn't work really well? How do
Mhm.
you go back and forth? How does that work?
Yeah. I mean, it's a real partnership and collaboration. So when I acquire a book, and I think this is how most editors operate, before I make any kind of offer, I always want to have a phone call or a video call now with the author to make sure that we're on the same page, that we have the
Mhm.
same vision for this book. Because even if I, love a book, if the reasons that I love it are, or the vision that I have for what that book could become, are really different from what the author wants that book to be,
Yeah.
that will not be a successful publication, or it will just be a very painful editorial process. So, first I will always speak to somebody before offering, because it's hopefully going to be a very long relationship that we have together. So we need to make sure we're on the same page and could work well together. And then, and during that call, I'll also preview some of the editorial work that I think we might want to work on together. And it ends up being really a collaboration. I always say in my editorial letter, these are suggestions. This is ultimately your book. Everything I am doing for the book, everything I have suggested is because I love it and because I really want to, help it reach its maximum potential. But, ultimately it's the author's book. It's going to be the author's name on the cover. So, they have to be really happy with it.
For sure. One of the things that my camera has frozen, so I look like I'm praying. So I apologize.
You're very contemplative.
Yes, I feel like this is, it's a very it's a spiritual moment for me over here with my frozen internet. I apologize. I'm gonna try and work that out in 1 second. But I want to take a couple questions here from the audience because people are asking some really great questions that you and I have just touched on a little bit. But there's a question from Sally on LinkedIn, who it's a very long thing that she's writing here. But what I think she's asking here is, you mentioned the editorial calendar, editorial meeting, right? And so in that editorial meeting, you may not say, hey, I'm not going to take this book, I'm going to pass on this book. But do you talk through with the other editors in the room and say, hey, this is something that is out there. This is what's, available, I guess.
Yeah, I will. If something is not for me after I have read it, but I think it's good enough that someone else on my team might want to consider it, I will say that to the agent when I write them that email with my thoughts, explaining why it's not for me. I might say, you might want to send it to this colleague of mine because I could see it potentially being for them. So, and that way I never want Putnam to miss out, again, because it's so subjective.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Enjoy.
So what about, let's see, another one over here. Someone is asking, let me see here. Oh, about media. Okay, let's talk about that real quick. So, what sorts of challenges crop up for media when books build different relationships with their readers and give them those different experiences while reading? I'm not sure I completely understand what this is getting at. So if you're watching and you want to clarify for us, please do. Let's talk about media in general. Like how important is doing media? Because not all authors want to do media, especially not fiction, right? They say, I will let the book speak for itself. And then that's where, me, the media trainer, says, no, you need to speak for it. So how important is doing media?
If you're good at it, it's really important. I think that sometimes the discomfort with media can show. I don't think, hopefully it would never harm the chances of the book reaching its audience. I think that working on those skills can be really good, working on speaking skills and being able to connect with an audience over media. Honestly, just securing media is really a challenge. So I don't want to talk about media as though it's a given that every single book and every single author is going to get like XYZ book events or appearances. I think as a publisher and our publicity team certainly would love to get tons of media for every single book, but that is a real challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
Just given the landscape for book coverage that's available.
Right. Someone is asking also about about Crawdads, about editing Crawdads, how different it was in the beginning and at the end of the book.
That book came in really good shape. One of the things that we did work on was the timeline, and when the timeline of the past met up with the timeline of the present. So I think it was it starts in the 50s with Kaya's childhood, and then you have the 1969 storyline. And so when those two met, we moved much later so that less of the past, so that you experience the past in real time, which made it feel much more immediate rather than having it as a flashback. So we worked on that. We worked on the love story, and we worked on making Chase. I hated Chase so much when I first read the book, but I was like, I don't even understand why Kaya would be with him. I don't get it. So we really worked on trying to get across on the page what it is that Kaya gets from that relationship, and why she might have engaged with Chase.
I see. I see. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see how they deal with it on the big screen. Yes. Will you be seeing the movie, you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so fun. So great. I love it. Well, it's so much fun to chat with you. My camera is not working, so I'm staying behind the scenes. But this is this is a show about being behind the scenes. So I'm staying behind the scenes and bringing forth those people who are, the unsung heroes sometimes. Not everyone will know your name. It's not on the cover of a book, but you are behind some of the biggest best-selling books out there today. And so I wanted to make sure that we knew a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and what are you working on now, and how can people reach you if they want to? I mean, obviously through their agent, but what sort of things do you look for? What are you working on now?
Sure. So because we work far ahead in publishing, I'm working on the books that will be published in summer 2023 next year. And there's a few books that I'm really excited about. But I'll tell you about books that are going to be coming out sooner than that. Actually, a book just came out that it's called Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan, and I'm working on her next book, which will be published next summer. It's a perfect beach read if you're a fan of like Emily Henry. This is definitely the kind of book that you are looking for. But it has also sort of added layers because our heroine is a divorced mom of 2 kids, and the love story totally delivers. But it's a perfect beach read, which I feel like now is a good time to talk about that.
For sure. And what sort of things are you looking for? If someone was watching this and they're like, hey, you know what? I'm writing something, I'm working on something, what are those things that are like, oh, that's a Tara book?
Yeah. I look for accessible but good writing. And like I said earlier, I'm looking for books that are when you finish them, you are reminded what is beautiful about the world, what people are capable of. That doesn't mean that the book doesn't necessarily go to a dark place, but that in the end, you end up in a place where you are sort of reminded of the power of people and how we can overcome. Or I just want to be completely entertained with like a great beach read.
Totally. Right. Exactly. You just want to go somewhere else right now. And
exactly.
Awesome.
Yes. Oh, and I'm definitely an armchair traveler. So I love books that are set. I probably don't do very many like New York writerly kind of books. I'm from the Midwest. My dad's from India, and I like books that are set in other places. Interesting family dynamics. But if there's a hook and a great elevator pitch, I'm there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. And for those of you who are leaving questions, please continue to do that. We will check back on those. And, of course, see what else Tara has to offer. There's a lot of new books coming out there, so that'll be exciting to read those and follow your journey. Thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, everybody, for the great questions.
And, I have a little freebie for everybody who's watching. It's my checklist to become a go-to media expert, which you can grab if you go to paularizzo.com/checklist. And I hope you keep in touch and have a good one. We'll see you soon.